I think one of the things to realize is that so religion was organizing everybody, and you can look at if you look at the Hebrew Scripture, or the Old Testament as literary text, especially the history, you can understand that. Well, it's a very nomadic peoples who literally that's what it was. They just kept wandering around. They just kept moving around, and I think what kind of got it started was as the civilizations in Sumer, as they started experiencing warfare, and then as soon as it really was like when they experienced a very like a very violent warfare where people were like actually conquering, it pushed them out, or because they're nomads, they kind of living on the fringe. It really pushed them away, and so that's why they went to the west, and they just luckily happened upon the Dead Sea, and that's where they kind of established their the original place of not Judah, but yeah, it's probably Judah. And then eventually they were pushed out from there, because it was like basically later, but the same enemies. They came in and they just pushed them out again. So they left and went to Egypt, which you can also see, by this point, because this idea of a king was established, the Egyptians would have swallowed up as well. And you can look at their history and how, for them, it's everything developed around organization. That was a revolutionary concept. That's why people got into communities, is because of organization. You could organize people to farm. You could organize people to and how to live, and so you organize farmers too. And then you had laws, and the first laws are always about inheritance and property. So it's always the thing is to recognize that that's what everybody wants. They want to make sure that their property is recognized as theirs, and backed up by the state. So that's the other reason for laws. Basically, laws. If a thing is a law is written down, that's the same as like a religion, and as taboo, and as this is why it exists. Why am I in charge? Because the law says I'm in charge. Why am I in charge? Because religion says I'm in charge. That kind of thing. It's these concepts that everybody agrees, understands these concepts, these rules. So that's how everybody's going to live and organize themselves according to those concepts. And it's religion and government are one in one. They're one and the same. So that's why it's all understood. But where there's religious, and it's also because the original laws by Hammurabi were a lot of them were religiously influenced, or have some of them have like religious reverence and reflection, because he considered himself also the reason why he's in charge is because of God. God decides this or that. So okay, that's what God decides. And that's why everybody's going to accept that. And so you even have the priests, who by this point are the priests, you could say, rule by influence, as usual. And they realize, well, we can basically live pretty well. We'll make this guy think he's in charge, but I think it's always it's kind of always been understood that, whatever you do, you have to have religion as your tool, as your mechanism for controlling people. If people say, well, God decides this, that's what people accept. Because you're not going to have this concept of believing and following something as a political maneuver until later. And that would be like stuff like taking your word, like giving an oath and stuff like that. So, but that's something that the Greeks would kind of get into, is they really started believing in this idea that and also, yeah. So, anyways, but by the time that in Sumer, they're conquering, it's not it's like the Assyrians or the precursors of them. I'm sorry I don't know the names fully, but the Assyrians were basically the empire that was established, and it conquered all this land all the way up to Egypt, and the Assyrians, because they control so much land, you can imagine that this information just spreads like wildfire, and there's also like the concept of a king, it's going to spread like wildfire, because people are like, oh, you have a king, you have somebody who's in charge of you, and that's what everybody's going to do. They're going to try to conquer and take charge of everybody around them, and it's just how well you can organize the group of people into a nation that's how quickly you're going to establish your footprint. Like what you live, what you have, what belongs to you, in a way. And it's also establishing this concept to everybody around that somebody commands you, somebody is in charge of you. So that's what everybody's going to accept. And so you can imagine that it's to subdue that individualistic spirit, which we find it's the hardest thing to do. Is going to happen. So, but this is like just the foundation of society that I'm describing. It's what everybody came from. It's what everybody kind of started out with, and that's what reflects, or that's how society started, was through religion. It was language had to occur that allowed for communities. It really, what I mean by community, I mean like allowed for groups beyond the family to exist. So you had to have language come about. And then you could have, a group larger than the family. So you could have, a couple different families, like, 3 or 4. And they could work together for projects. And because of that, then you have hunter-gatherers, but you can also have people who can settle down. But on top of that, you also have people who are revered and considered, special. And it's not always the old, because the old are going to die. Always, it's like the average life expectancy was like in the 30s, like 36 years old. For these, the hunter-gatherer, wandering tribe people. But it would be the special people, because they're the only people that, they're young enough and able enough to survive, whatever infancy, other thing. But they're gonna, they're not really producing and not helping out, so they have to have a certain place. The concepts that religion introduced. As soon as language happens, people are able to introduce concepts into each other's minds, and part of that is religion. Right after that is leadership and organization, and basically who's in charge. Who do you belong to, and that's where it falls right hand in hand. Now, because of this, you're going to see, I think, an interesting aspect that the further away from religion you get, the more towards equality you tend to get in society, in mankind. So I think bizarre concept that the less religious you are, the more equalitative you tend to become. But just one idea. So my interpretation of history. Okay, so it's you send people out to raid and stuff like that, or it's like no. Okay, the way I started this all was that it's recording. So I'm going to record our conversation. Because it's very, very intellectual.
Yes.
And we're never sharing this wisdom with the public, with the masses. So, revolution of ideas, I call it. This is my dad, by the way, who's talking. So, anyways, what you see happening is that what kept people together? What kept these? There. You could understand that basically when people start living together, when people start living together. And communities, and they're brought together by religion first. That's what's key. Is that you had to basically have this, because they're communicating with each other based on language, right? So you can imagine there's all sorts of language, but there's a lot of mother tongues because people have moved to these locations, but they're from basic locations, and then they settle, and then this is the way they speak to each other, which is a little bit different than what the previous community did. So this is what they studied in the Hawaiian and other Pacific islands, the different languages. And they realized, we can tell where we can follow the language trees. We know where the people came from. Mm-hmm. It's very fascinating. So you can imagine that's the same thing happening with. And
did the genetics back them up?
Genetics back them up too, I think. Yeah. But I mean, and you can even see like the way people look. So, but anyways, so in Mesopotamia, Sumer and stuff like that, that's what happened too. Is that they started settling down. And they were able to live together because of religion. Because religion was this thing of the air. You had a holy man, but the holy man organized society. And it was one guy who organized society, and he just kind of told you what to do. But it was more like through influence. Because when you think about it, in a real primitive culture, who gets everything? Who gets paid to just sit there and make noise and stuff like that? The holy man. And why? It's because he knows how to play the game. He'll know how to heal. But he also knows how to influence people because he's smart enough to know that I can rule these people through fear and force and whatever. But no, I'm gonna rule these people through influence. They'll more or less do what I ask them to do.
Well,
you know what I mean.